Welcome to the Influential Christian Entrepreneur Podcast, where we uncover the inspiring stories and strategies of successful Christian entrepreneurs. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Daniel Andrews, who's a native of Columbia, South Carolina, where he currently resides after an absence of 13 years. He owns a business that shows business people how to identify, find, meet, and nurture professional relationships with key referral partners. Fundamentally, he shows business people how to stop networking and start building true networks. This is his fourth career. He's been successfully self-employed for 35 years, 49 if you start with a lemonade stand in first grade. He can easily be found at www.danielpatrickandrews.com. Welcome, Daniel. How are you today? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored. I have so much respect for you that it means a lot to me that I've been invited to be on your podcast and to share some thoughts with you on this. And I want to address the fact that over my head it says quiet area. I'm out of town visiting my mom at the moment, and the local library parked me over here. And they're like, the kids are gone for the day. So
That's awesome.
I'm in the children's section of the local public library in Orange County, Virginia.
So. Oh, awesome. Awesome. So I thank you for making the effort, because I would have just canceled, but you're a trooper. You're a trooper. And I wanted to have you on this podcast because I just met you not too long ago, and I was truly impressed by how you put it about, you networking. How did you say that? Networking is not a verb, or network is not a verb, it's a noun, or treat it like a noun to build your network instead of doing all this constant networking. Because it can be so frustrating when you're just going to all these Zoom meetings and meeting people, and because you don't have a strategy, you don't know exactly what you're doing, you're really wasting your time. And wasting a lot of time, I'd say.
Correct. Right. Any time that's not being used as efficiently as it could be, it could be wasted time. And I do believe that we don't view other people as tools, right? Right. Part of the way, and this relates to you, in the conversation specifically that you want to have, that when I'm talking to people and I talk about strategic connections, that quality beats quantity, I do acknowledge, and I say the phrase, we're all God's children. We all have value in His sight. But given a finite amount of time that you can devote to your business, you want to find and nurture relationships with the people that you can do the most and receive the most from. And I think that's a fairly important distinction. And I don't fault people I don't think people have the wrong heart when they go out and do what they call networking. And I always put air quotes around it, or actually write it in quotation marks, networking as a verb, because I believe that you should trade whatever you think of networking as for building true relationship or true networks as a noun. But, the proof is in the fact that people aren't getting the results that they want. So they're not, whatever it is they're doing, they're not necessarily doing anything wrong, but they're clearly not doing enough of the right things. Meaning, I think people do a reasonably good job of starting the process, and they get about 2% down the path and stop, not because they don't care, but because they don't have a model for, progressing the relationship, right? We think that I call it marketing by hand, right? The physical version, which we're still familiar with, right? We haven't gone fully digital, fully AI yet, right? Is, you give somebody a business card, you're like, hey, this is what I do, right? If you ever need me, call me. Oh, better yet, Francine, if you ever think of anybody that needs me, have them call me. And we think we're doing networking, or we've done nothing of the sort, because we've not given that person any compelling reason for the referral to come to us instead of whoever else they know that does what we do. And even if what we do is so niche that they don't know anyone else that does what we do, they're still not going to put their reputation online and create the introduction until some degree of credibility has been established. And people don't have a model for building cred.
And that has to be taught. I guess there are some people who maybe naturally know how to network. I don't know, maybe. But most of us, I think it's a skill that really needs to be developed.
When I assemble the toolbox, right, I used to say roadmap, but it makes it sound like it's step 1 and step 2 and step 3 and step 4, and it's not. I use the metaphor toolbox, and an analogy would be, right, that at my house I have several toolboxes. I have the toolbox that's in the house. It's got a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips, electrical tape, duct tape, right, small hammer, and a
Mm-hmm.
couple of picture hangers, right? Then there's the toolbox that's in the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got the tire jack, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
air pump and the jumper cables. And it has no wrenches, because if I popped the hood and adjusted anything, we would be in worse shape than when we started, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a couple in case somebody who knows comes along, but most people who know that might come along to help probably also have the tools, right? But then there's the deluxe tool set that's in the garage, which is literally one of everything, right? You know, it's sockets from A to Z in both metric and English. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the you know, the wire cutters, the wire strippers, it's you know, everything I could possibly need. So I tell people, you already have the tools. You just need to put them in the toolbox that represents what you want to do in terms of relationship building. I'm not teaching anybody a skill that they don't already have. They just forget to use it or have never thought to apply it in the setting of, you know, building trusted relationships.
Right. Not knowing how to apply it. So you have the tools doesn't mean that you necessarily know how to use them right.
Or how often you have to repeat things before they start to sink in. This is
Yeah.
fascinating. We know this about children that we've raised. We know this about customers, but yet when it comes to professional relationships, we lose sight of the fact that about the time you're tired of saying it is when they start to hear it.
That's quite funny.
But it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it is true. It's so totally true. Absolutely. And I don't think anything will ever replace networking. And like you said, the people who build a network after a point, they're done. They got their network. So you have to work on the process of building it
Right.
and kind of
Right.
like
And
building a
Francine's
house.
referenced in something we said in one of our early conversations, which is, right, people who are constantly networking are clearly not good at it. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not good at getting the results they want, you know. And I have this conversation all the time because people that are extroverts think they're good at it. You know, I'm good at networking. And I'm like, bet you're not. And one of my subtle ways of getting people's attention is to be low key contrary, right? You know, no. You
Uh-huh.
know, Brian Tracy calls it the sharp angle approach, right? You know,
Yeah.
not necessarily a 2x4 to the side of the head, but an elbow in the rib cage, right? You know, and they go, well, I think I am. I said, I tell you what, I'll ask you two questions and then we'll know. And I go, fair enough. So you'll tell me if you're good at this or not. And the first question for you, very simply, Fred, Susie, Bob, Francine, right, is this, right? Of all the adults that you know, because we assume children aren't part of the process in your business, of all the adults that you know, how many of them could refer business to you? I'm not particularly worried about the number. They tend to come out low, medium, or high, right? If they're
Uh-huh.
a real estate agent or insurance agent, they'll say 80, 90, 100%. So that's high, right? So they'll say something that's high. If they're super niche, like the guy that sells glow-in-the-dark rope or the professional mermaid that I've both worked with, right, they'll say 10, 20%. If they're an average everyday, you know, B2B, you know, they do payroll or they're CPA or, you know, they do $2,000 websites, you know, digital marketing, they'll say 50%. But
Mm-hmm.
again, low, medium, high, the number's not important. And sometimes they just won't say it out loud, but I say, do you have a number in your head? And they'll nod at me and go, yeah, I have a number in my head. Of that number, what percentage actively refer customers to you? Not even frequently, just actively. More than once have sent your customer a referral. And they're like, yeah, not very many. And I'm like, oh, so you're good at making friends.
Uh-huh. And that will pay the bills.
Which is fine if you want more friends, right? But I presume you're engaging in these places in pursuit of more business. So, you know, what are
Mm-hmm.
you doing? What are you leaving off, right? I don't think people are doing anything wrong at open events or group events, digital or in person, where they're meeting a lot of people. But they have no idea. And follow-up is not sending an email, Francine, so nice to meet you. Like I said at the day I met you, if you think of me and you need me, call me. Or if you find anybody that needs me, call me. No.
Never works.
It's not going to take you where you want to go.
No,
And
it's not.
right. And so what happens next in terms of sorting who you're going to offer to build with, how you're going to offer to build with them, if they accept your offer to build a professional relationship with them, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make it clear that they know what you need? Because they cannot send you the resources and referrals you need unless you're clear about what you need. The
Mm-hmm.
reverse of that is you can't support them unless they're clear about what they need. And if
Mm-hmm.
I had to coach you on how to be clear when you talk to Francine, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
need to coach Francine on how to be clear when she talks to you. You have to
Mm-hmm.
show them how to show you how to support them. And
Yeah.
people will drop the ball there because it feels awkward to coach the other person or kind of grill them a little bit. about, but come on, Francine, I need you to be super clear, right? A great example, an attorney I was coaching around this. I said, who's your target market? He said, sophisticated legal consumers with sophisticated legal needs. And I said, Aaron, that is a great model in your head as you're talking to your business partners when you're laying out your plan for the next year. That's great. I don't know who those people are. They don't walk around with tattoos that say sophisticated legal, right? I said, I need you to give me adjectives that would allow me to recognize them by what they say, what they do, what they look
Yeah.
like, where they go. And he only had to reflect for a moment. I mean, he got the point immediately. And he said, oh, they have one location and they're starting a second. They're going from under 15 employees to over because some federal regs kick in. He said they're going from under 50 to over 50 because a whole other set of federal regs kick in at 50. They have they're opening in another state.
Mm-hmm.
Or they have employees that moved away during the pandemic that are in other states, and they have rules they got to, mesh across state lines, right? Because you got to make things kind of even and equal and apply, both state laws, so to speak. Anyway, I'm not a lawyer, but because those are the conversations I have with the people in my community. Oh, we're opening a new location. Oh, we're starting a new line. Oh, we gave Bob permission to work from home, and now we found out he lives in Massachusetts, right? He never told us he was going to do that, right? Those are the conversations come up. So, I had to jog him a little bit. Okay, fine. Sophisticated legal consumers with sophisticated legal needs. That's a legitimate descriptor for you. It does no good for me as a potential referral partner. And so, you've got to coach those people to tell you what you need to know so that you can then support them. And people they get hesitant to coach somebody. I'm like, but you want to help them. You're not doing them any good if you're not willing to help them.
And that's where you build your network when that process takes place where I coached you, you coached me. Yes.
Well, and this is what a lot of people miss too. They'll be like, well, I don't want to sound like I'm condescending or treating them like they don't know what they're doing. I said, trust me, they know they don't know what they're doing. Otherwise, they'd be getting the results that they want.
Right.
And I said, here's the key. When you guide them and show them that you understand what your role is and help them understand what their role is, subconsciously or consciously, you're building trust in you because they're like, this person knows what they're doing. Of all the people I could go to lunch with or have a video call with, I'm going to come away better for the conversation with the Francines of the world than I am the people that have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
So it may be conscious or maybe subconscious, but you're actually building trust when you show them that there is a way to do this in a way that gets results.
Absolutely.
Right? And then how do you introduce people is important, and how do you ask for referrals? But if you've done all the other part right, if you've built the trust, if you've laid the groundwork that this is what our relationship's about, if you've built the trust, if you've supported them, if you've told them what you need, you've told them that you've had them tell you what they need, then asking, hey, Francine, here's the part where you and I were going to get out our Rolodexes and start trading referrals. Can we do that? Is that a good use for our time today? Yeah. And I've got on video calls and been like, playing on my phone, not playing, but, oh, Francine, here's somebody. Yeah, I do want that. Okay, let me create that in real time. The Zoom's running, and on the other screen, I'm creating intros, and they're doing the same for me. That's a very good use of my time.
That's a very good use of time. That's the dream scenario. And so, I mean, you have been in this world of networking, and you are a Christian entrepreneur. How long have you been? I know you've been an entrepreneur for possibly 49 years, if we include first grade. But when did you become a Christian?
I grew up in a household of faith. My dad actually went to seminary and was ordained as a minister, and was a youth minister briefly, and then recommissioned back in the Air Force. He had cycled out of the Air Force and gone to seminary, and then went back into the Air Force as a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and just before I was born. So, and he spent 2 years overseas. But my mom was the pianist. He was a deacon in every church. Of course, you don't get the average MDiv sitting in the pews, right? So some of the masters of divinity, right? Right. So he was nominated for deacon very consistently. And, I think there is a philosophy of salvation that represents children that grew up in a home of faith may never have a moment where they're like, I was a heathen and now I'm saved. Now, having said that,
right,
I do remember as a child being convicted of my need for a savior. I do remember as an adult making some poor choices that led to the end of my first marriage. But I do remember working with a counselor in an intensive format, 24 hours of counseling over a 3-day period with myself, my wife, and wingmen for each one of us, by the way. This was like a multi-party affair. And the counselor was telling the story of Lazarus. why did Lazarus die and then become resurrected? Why didn't you just heal him to start with? Because Christ, you could have done that. And he basically said, none of your business. I mean, he didn't say that. He said it so the Father could be glorified, right? And I remember in that moment being aware that my struggles didn't mean I had never been saved, right? I'd never been more sure of my salvation in that moment, because I realized that, I'm responsible for my poor choices, but God allowed me to, pursue an ungodly path, knowing that he was going to use that for his own glory in terms of showing people what's possible, coming back. Mostly me, right? As in, I went through a lot of counseling on the other side of my divorce, not to deal with the divorce, but to deal with the issues that led to the divorce, and free from the frustrations and the stuff. And so, having felt right. So I can't say on such and such a date,
right,
I became saved. Right. But I do know that there have been moments when I'm like, okay, I got to be serious about this. Like I said, I don't know if I'm too much of a witness to other people, although I will preach against those particular evils, when I encounter them, right? Individually, right? You're struggling with that. You want to figure out how to give that up, because that ain't going to work over the long haul. But also, just in my own life, right, that he's shown me that, he can resurrect from the dead, right, and bring life back. It's pretty powerful. And I'm married to a Christian woman now, and on good terms with my ex, right? We're still friendly, right? We're both believers, and there was no, there was a lot of hurt at the end of the marriage, but there wasn't any animosity. Right? We didn't wish ill on the other person. To help you understand, our entire divorce cost us $335.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That kind of summarizes a lot right there.
Yeah. Very simple. Very simple.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, the whole premise behind this podcast, I love to ask Christian entrepreneurs about the fact that we've always been told that it's bad for business to mix your faith or religion with business. Also, mix politics, but in this case, we're talking about faith. Do you think it's okay for people to mix their faith in their business? Do you think so? Do you think it depends? What do you think about that in general?
Yeah. I think, if you're flying over at 50,000 feet, which to me is the highest level, right? I took flying lessons briefly. My dad was a pilot, and I wanted to, be like that. But, at 50,000 feet, which to me is the level that the highest level, right? You can fly higher, but it's hard. I don't think anybody doesn't bring their true worldview and faith to their work environment. Meaning, if you're going to articulate that you don't bring your faith to work, I'm going to make some judgments, discernments, maybe, because Christians hate the word judging, even though Christ called us to judge in quite a number of cases. But bring some discernments to the strength and validity of your faith if you're afraid of it right now. Will I acknowledge that it may cost us business? Yes. Will I acknowledge that in some cases it may gain us business? Yes. I do know that a lot of people put that little ichthus on their billboards, and that a lot of other people, particularly who aren't Christians, will avoid those businesses because they said, I never met a bigger crook than the guy that put the ichthus on his billboard. I'm like, ooh, I hate that part, right? That they're giving us a bad name. But, Penn Jillette, the magician, he's an atheist, but he says, if you say you're a believer and you don't actively try to convert me to Christianity, he goes, you're not a believer. He said, even as somebody who doesn't believe, he said, I understand. Now, I don't think that my mission every day as part of my work has to be proselytization, right?
Right.
But how can I ever attract people towards Christ? How can I ever have the authority, the credibility to point people towards Christ if they don't know that I'm a Christian, right? If I only want to do business, if I come on so strong that I only want to do business with Christians, then where's my witness field, right?
Yeah.
But I don't mind letting people know I stand for something. I don't mind letting people know. I had a guy come on the screen the other day for Quick Connect, and he saw a cross on the wall behind me, because when in my home office, there's a cross on the wall behind me. He says, tell me about the cross. Who's Jesus Christ? That was like his first two questions. I had no idea whether I was walking into, enemy territory or a fellow believer? And I answered it because the reality is I don't care. And it doesn't mean I don't care about my faith. But if he's screening me, he's entitled to, number one. And number two, I'm okay with that. And then as he talked, he held his hand up and I could see that he had a ring on that was an ichthus, and I'm like,
what is an
but
ichthus?
I didn't, the little fish symbol.
Oh, okay.
Right. The Greek words, the first letter of the Greek words, I think that say King of the Jews.
Okay. Got it.
Spell out the word fish. And so when you see a little fish, symbol, it's a Christian symbol, much like a cross.
So he was a Christian. He was asking.
Right. Now, and then of course you'll see the mocking of that, right? They'll put feet on the fish because they believe in Darwin, right? And that we evolved from sea-dwelling creatures to land-dwelling creatures. But the ichthus is the little simple fish drawing, and it comes from the fact that some of the initials for one of Christ's titles in Greek spell out the word fish, basically.
So it's not about you don't necessarily have to. You don't have to hide that you're a Christian. You don't have to put it all over your personal brand and social media. Everybody has their own, I guess, style in a way. But at the same time, I also do acknowledge what you just said, that there are some people that use the label of being a Christian as a way to possibly gain trust. And that has given us all a bad name, which is me coming from the secular world only 3 years ago. Anybody who was too vocal about being Christian, it
makes you wonder why.
Maybe give me a red flag coming from that world. But it just depends on, people can see through certain things. So, if it's authentic and genuine, you can feel that. But if it feels kind of contrived, do business with me because I'm a Christian, then, but also,
right. If you're using it as a shortcut to credibility, you got to stop and ask yourself, why do you need to use a shortcut to credibility? Maybe it's because you don't have a model of building cred, outside that, right? So
exactly.
I'm not soliciting business, right? But maybe you need a better model for building credibility that it doesn't involve throwing an ichthus out there. Now, the other side of that are, in fairness, I'm not letting the pendulum swing too far, right? I was struck a number of years ago by a story that was told as true, meaning this isn't an illustration, this is an actual truth. But a fellow was talking about the fact that one of his coworkers came to work on a Monday and he said, I went to church, I've been attending, and he said, I gave my life to Christ over the weekend. I'm a Christian. And the guy telling the story said, oh, so good. Me too. This is great. And the guy's like, you're a Christian. He goes, yeah. The guy telling the story. And the coworker says, you are one of my biggest stumbling blocks to becoming a Christian. And the guy's like, elaborate. I'd like to fix that if I could. He said, you never talked about your faith, but it was clear that you had your life together. And I thought, if he can have his life together and not be a believer, maybe I don't need to be a believer. So the guy telling the story had never identified himself as a believer, and that actively became a stumbling block to his coworker's conversion. Thankfully, it didn't keep him from that. But when I heard that story, I'm like, okay, I'm not hiding my light under a bushel, right? I absolutely cannot have anybody go, well, Dan, you're proof that you don't have to be a believer, to get it all done.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
Clearly, I haven't done my messaging well.
Wiki. So it's a lot of fear, because I experienced that in putting that out there, because you feel like you will be judged. Like you said, you might lose business. People will think you're a Jesus. Those are all the things I used to think. And it held me back for such a long time because of that fear of how you are perceived. But then I came to the realization that for me, at very least, it was important to put it out there and let everyone know, not as a way to just kind of rub it in people's faces or trying to push my beliefs on other people. But I think it's important to not have that hide the light, because you never know, where you're going to plant a seed. And that's how it happened to me. Like, somewhere I saw something on social media somewhere, maybe I saw a series of things that started to soften that ground. And then when that seed came in, it started to grow, and it was a process. And if it wasn't because of those people who didn't hide their light, I don't know that I would be here right now.
I think a lot of people are afraid to bring it forward, whether out of, sense of scarcity, right, that they might lose this potential customer, right? But maybe you'll still win the customer, and they need to know that you're a believer, right? They may come to you and ask for advice before they'll ask their spouse or their next door neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Meaning you could be enough removed from the situation that they can tell you, what they're struggling with potentially, right? Sometimes
Absolutely.
we've struggled to tell our closest friends what we're struggling.
Yes.
Okay. But I do think some people are reluctant because they're afraid they'll lose business, which again, I think that doesn't show a lot of faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's God will bring you
Mm-hmm.
what you need. But I think sometimes people are reluctant because they're not prepared to discuss it at any depth. And I don't think we all need to go out and get a master's of divinity degree,
Exactly.
by a long
That's a
shot.
big reason. You hit the nail on the head. I felt like that because I can't give you a Bible scripture. I haven't gone through the entire Bible. I've not memorized any, of it. I can't eloquently say the things that maybe you can say because you've been a Christian for so long. That's a big stumbling block, or was a big stumbling block for me.
Well, it's not because I've been a Christian for so long. It's because when my first wife went to get an MDiv, I went and sat in on a lot of the classes. So I feel, more prepared, to converse about that. But, what I encounter, and of course, whether or not I can get into a discussion with these people, is another level. But people that I know follow me on Facebook, right, will occasionally throw out something, in context, meaning it's not randomized, but if I've posted something or if I've reflected on something, and they'll say something about, if there's a God that's all-knowing and all-seeing and all-powerful, then, what's the point? Because, whatever we do is preordained and, we don't have any choice. And, so, it's not right. Life would be meaningless if there was an all-seeing, all-powerful God. And I say, okay, well, I get that, but that shows about a minute's worth of thinking on the subject, because the atheists of the world, who are the deep thinkers, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Stephen Hawking, et cetera, who have spent a life thinking about atheism and advocating atheism, will tell you that if there is no creator, then there is no free will. And if there is no free will, there is no differentiator between good and evil. And if that's the case, then it is truly meaningless, because nothing can have meaning, because I don't say it's randomized, but it's predestined.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're all just a series of molecules moving through time and space. And, people go, well, that didn't make sense, right? It's if there is a God that, there's no free will. And I say, but see, I have enough awareness to know. I said, okay, so your brand of atheism that you spent about 10 minutes on somehow contradicts the people who've spent a lifetime studying atheism and their conclusions, right? And I know that, and I know enough for them to say to them, kind of the sharp angle close. No, you're absolutely wrong, right? Your 10 minutes worth of thought on why you chose not to believe in a creator, right, is somehow arrives at the correct logical conclusion, and not the Christopher Hitchens and the Richard Dawkins of the world. I'm like, what? I'm like, read any of their books, and they will say over and over through all of their books, there is no meaning. There is no meaning. And I mean, even Christopher Hitchens, he's on TV and he's like, yeah, people attack me. And he goes, and I have to shrug and go, it's preordained. They don't have any choice. They have to attack me. I have to defend, and they have to attack. We're all here where we're at, and there is no free will. But I know enough to be able to challenge people on that, instead of sitting back there quietly going, how do I answer that? But even Paul Simon, who grew up Jewish, right? He'll describe himself as agnostic. One of his more successful recent albums, because he's been in the music business since the 60s, is titled So Beautiful or So What? And that's the name of one of the songs as well. And I saw the interview where somebody asked him, what does that mean? And he said, either there is a creator or everything is meaningless. And this is an artist. And he still had enough philosophical sense to realize that if there's a creator, then everything is beautiful. And if there's not a creator, then so what? It's so beautiful, or so what? And the ability to say to people, it's actually the lack of a creator that creates meaninglessness. So if you think life has meaning, I don't think you can start from your emotions and work backwards. But if you're convinced that the love you feel for your child or your spouse somehow is a separate thing than the neutrons and the chemicals and the atoms moving through your body, if you believe that it exists as a thing other than a physical manifestation of atoms moving through time and space, then you have to acknowledge a creator. Because if you don't, then it doesn't represent anything other than atoms that are tricking you into thinking you feel something. And it's not even real. And people are moved by that because they know how they feel about their spouse and about their kids. And like, that's real. I'm like, okay, well, it came from somewhere.
Interesting. So you will actually, engage people on social media about these issues. Is that the way you kind of do it, as far as incorporating the faith?
I'll throw it out. I mean, I'm not doing proselytizing via social media, right? But I'll throw it out there if the chance comes up. I'll always ask them for a conversation because the reality is, number one, you can't settle this in a bunch of back and forth through social media. Number two, people who have no facts behind them, which tends to be one particular strain of the political spectrum, will attack. They will call names, right? But in a one-to-one setting, they're not going to call. They might, but they also realize the futility of it. But if they think they can score points on social media by telling me I'm an idiot, as opposed to engaging with the information I've put forward and either showing me contradictory information or positing a different view, different conclusion from the same set of facts or whatever, they will. So I'm always like, look, happy to have this conversation, only willing to have it if you want to have a conversation. Because if this is all you're willing to put into this is a bunch of social media posts, then you're not really wanting the truth anyway. You're trying to score points at my expense, right? But if you actually want to have the conversation, I'm open, I'm time pressed, I will make the time for you if you want to have this conversation. And a friend of mine, longstanding friend of mine, lives several hours away. He's like, come on down and we'll talk about this. And I'm going to read Christopher Hitchens' book on atheism, again, one of his books, so that when I walk in to talk with my very, very dear friend, I'll be prepared to say, this is how Christopher Hitchens determined that if there's not a creator, then it is meaningless. So if you want to believe life has meaning, if you're going to tell me that you're convinced that's true, you've got to come up with a creator of some sort. Now we can debate, whether or not the God as we know him from the Old and New Testament is the one, whether, Allah, or whoever, but you can't not acknowledge a creator if you're going to acknowledge meaning. And I'll invest a whole weekend on, staying with this guy at the coast. I don't know how much it will spend on the conversation, but I'm absolutely willing to do that because it is absolutely true. And I have enough information, enough awareness of where the worldview came from to be able to debate it. And I think people don't bring it up because they don't know what to say when people say, my favorite is I can never believe in a God that, and they fill in the blank any way they want. Let's, children get cancer, let's, innocent civilians in Ukraine get killed, or whatever the case may be.
School shooting, whatever the case, yes.
And I'm like, well, if God is God, he ain't need your permission. Right. He's going to operate independent of your willingness to understand his /her, God's view on the universe. I said, if God is, and I get a lot of Buddhism from ex-Catholics because there's a whole lot of issues around that.
Oh yeah, I went that route too after.
Right. See, there we go. But so this. Right. Yeah. See, there we go. So this woman, and I'll use the first name, Kristen, is like, well, I just believe the universe brings you what you need when you need it. And I said, yeah. So some people call that God. She's like, no, like bigger than that, like the universe. And I'm like, some people call that God. She's like, no, bigger than that. I'm like, I'll stop you right here, Kristen. If God is God, God is already bigger than that. Whatever it is that you think you're describing.
Yeah, because
God is
the creator and the universe is the creation.
World Magazine is a great place, worldmag.org or World News Group, wng.org. They publish the news. They're like a Time or a Newsweek from a Christian perspective, not Christian news, but the news from meaning if the Bible's true, what does the news mean to us today? And several years ago, they were interviewing a couple of scientists on some issue. And the person that wrote the article, I think, was one of the seniors, one of the editors, one of the more, profound and established people there at the magazine, if I recall correctly. And he had two quotes from two different physicists, I believe they were, some specialty inside the world of physics. And he didn't comment on either of the quotes, because if you're a believer, the quotes kind of stand on their own. They don't need any extra commentary. And one of them was, I don't understand how people, he was a believer in evolution, meaning he's not a believer in creation, meaning he's not, he understands, like any true atheist does, that life is meaningless. I say understands, has the understanding that.
Yes.
Life is meaningless. And he said, I don't understand how people go through, including myself, go through day after day, as if life has meaning, knowing it doesn't. Right. And again, the author of the article, no commentary, because it kind of stands on its own. And then the other guy they quoted, he said, yeah, but the question is, again, not a believer, right? But he said, yeah, but the question is, before the Big Bang, where were the laws of physics written? Right? If the Big Bang responded to the laws of physics, somebody created the laws of physics. There is something bigger than what we know and experience in the world. Even if you're going to credit the Big Bang, you will always get back to, well, a thing just happened. Oh, so there's something that you can't identify that's the source of all things.
Of all things.
A lot of us call that God, and some of us know him personally.
You can't get something out of nothing.
You can't. At some point, you're going to have to go, and then this thing we can't explain.
Yeah.
Oh, some people call that God.
It's incredible the lengths that people will go to try to disprove the existence of God. I mean,
Or to ignore it.
Ignore it. They don't want to say God. They want to say universe. They want to say spirit. Oh, spiritual, not religious, because they associate religion with, I guess, something negative, which, you don't have to be religious to have a relationship with God, but people equate religion with. So, I think that's why Christians, we need to be a little bit more vocal. And I see that you have been able to, that you fully integrate your faith into your life and your business. There doesn't seem to be any degrees of separation between your faith and your life and your business. It's like holistic. And what I see myself included in the past, and many other Christians, that we want to compartmentalize, and so some people do it for a reason. This is the reason for the podcast, trying to get to the bottom of it. Like, what is it? Is it because is it a matter of style? Is it, some people say, well, I don't put it out there, for people to know, but then in the back end, they know. So everybody has a different style. I think some of them are rooted in fear, others maybe not, but I just really love your approach. And I think it comes from the fact that, your level of knowledge, the more, that's why they say stay in the word, right? The more you learn, because you can't learn if you don't read your Bible, you don't actively search. Right.
Yeah. So, Abraham Kuyper says, you read the news with your Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other, right? And, it's kind of hedging your bet, right? If you only have time to read one for the day, right? So my Bible is on my bedside table. It's not on my desk, right? But the cross is behind me. And you have to work inside your constraints. My wife is a nurse, right? She can't, oncology nurse. She deals when people are dying and their families all day, every day. And you can't just be like, hey, let me tell Christ our Lord and Savior. But she can wear her cross on the outside of her scrubs.
Yes.
Right. I mean, she has to tuck it in for certain exercises so it doesn't dangle in the patient's face, right? But she can wear the cross where people can ask her, which is fine. I'm in a different position where, number one, I'm self-employed. Number two, it's very much consulting. So I don't mind, I can ask people pretty directly, where do you go to church? Oh, I don't. Oh, tell me about that. Yeah. But I do believe, right? You said some people do it out of fear, some people do it for other reasons. It's all fear. They'll not call it fear, but it's lack of faith. Right? They're afraid they're going to miss something. They're going to be judged. The customer's not going to come back. The prospect's not going to come back.
They're going to offend somebody.
Or they're afraid of their inability, right? And when I say, that I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can at least cover the basics, right? Yeah. But you don't have to know, right? Meaning, if somebody says, well, I don't understand, can you explain that to me? No, but my pastor can. You want to come with me to church on Sunday? No. Well, can I subscribe you? Here, let me hold your phone. I'll subscribe you to the podcast. Why don't you listen to a couple of sermons in your car and see if this starts to make sense to you? Meaning, we don't have to have the answers. And as long as we can point people towards where they can find them.
You don't have to.
Right. So I would say that it's a lack of faith / fear in every case, right? Those are two words for either a greater greater fear that you can identify as fear, or a
Yeah.
lesser fear that you're going to call lack of faith, but it's really fear as part of it. And then, and it comes from, I think, the denial of God in general and Christ as our Lord and Savior comes from a fear that people will have to make changes. If you press people on, but if there was a God, what does that mean? They will always ultimately say, if they're being genuine about pursuing the logical, consequences, the logical outcomes of that question, they will admit that they need to make changes to their lifestyle. Even if they're, quote, good people and they're not breaking any of the 10 commandments, they're going to need to start going to church and tithing, right? And so, and then you're like, okay, so, and they're like, well, I don't want to make changes, right? It's the whole, I would never believe in a God that, meaning they would rather either not engage with God or disbelieve in God than make a change to their own worldview of the way things ought to be, right? I can't believe in a God that would let X, Y, Z happen. Okay, but if God is God, he doesn't need your permission. And if God is real, then you're going to need to adapt your understanding. You're not going to convince him to see it your way.
Change himself, right?
You're going to have to accept that, and it may mean it's simply unknowingness, right? I mean, we are called repeatedly to know God as well as we can, but God also says, my ways are not your ways. You're never going to get full comprehension. And this is what cracks me up. People go, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God this, or, when I get to heaven, I'm going to look back down on earth. When I get to heaven, I'm going to understand. No, when we get to heaven, we are going to worship God, period. I think we're going to go, what? I still don't know, but who cares? At this moment in God's presence, I don't need to think like God thinks. I just need to know that God is God and I'm not.
Yeah.
And people hate the unknowing, and they hate the changes that are impelled and compelled.
Required.
Right.
Required.
People stay ignorant on a number of subjects because they don't want to make changes.
They don't, it's like sometimes you just don't want to see it because it's painful, or you don't, it is. And we tend to just want to adjust God to how we want it to be, to make us feel better, build our own version. And that's called idolatry.
Yeah. I have a friend who's an addict and the mother of twin sons, and hopefully not too many people in my world are watching this, because I don't want to, if they don't know she's an addict, they might not, but I'm a good mother. We're like, are you really? But she can't shift her self-image. She can't, if to acknowledge her addiction is going to require her to say, I haven't been a good mother up to now.
Right. That's a hard pill to swallow.
And that is a very hard pill to swallow, particularly when the parenting you received wasn't good, and you probably swore to yourself that you would not be like your mom and dad. And guess what? You're a lot like your mom and dad. A lot. And right. So she's fighting the truth because the emotional consequences of the truth are weightier than she wants to bear. By the way, that's one of the most important things I've ever shared with people. If I have any wisdom, this is my meta of human behavior. And again, I'm not perfect. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm open to contradictions, right? I don't pretend to wisdom, but what seems to me is that people start with an emotionally acceptable conclusion and work the facts backwards. Right? I'm a good mother. Therefore, I can't be an addict. I need these pills to function. I'm not an addict. I need them. They help me. Right? Here's another good one for you. The children are doing okay with the divorce. They're not. Right? But we have to tell ourselves that in order to justify the divorce. Right? If we really realize that we've just screwed up our kids for the next 30 or 40 years, right?
You don't want to look at
which
that.
You shouldn't. Yeah. No, you don't. Right. And the woman that wrote the book in the 80s called The Kids Are All Right came back 30 years later and wrote another book and said, mea culpa. She's like, my bad. It shows up 30 years later. The kids are screwed up with the divorce. And I say that as a divorced person who didn't have kids, but and I know this is landing hard for people to listen to it that are divorced. Well, the kids seem like they're doing all right. Yes, they seem like they're doing all right because they will tell you they're doing all right. Ain't doing
they
all right.
Suppressed all of that.
My uncle, 3 grown children, none of whom speak down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're 0 for 3, right? Where is the fault? I just told you everything you need to know for you and I to identify where the fault lies.
Mm-hmm.
It's him or his wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
He can't acknowledge it. People go, why not? It's so obvious. I said, let me tell you a little more details and I'll explain to you why my uncle can't see it. And aside from a miraculous work of the grace of God, which does exist and may still happen, he won't see it. My uncle, and I hate what I'm about to say next, is a missionary, a home missionary, and his role was to establish outposts in various cities in the United States and recruit people from local churches, families, and show them how to raise their kids well. He ran a men's Bible study, his wife ran a women's Bible study, they ran a couples Bible study. And as a missionary, that means he solicited his friends and family for 40 years to fund his efforts. And if he's 0 for 3, it means he doesn't know how to raise kids right. Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't know how to raise kids right, and he spent the last 40 years trying to teach families how to raise kids right in a Christian household, he might have done more damage than he's done good. Mm. And if he spent 40 years soliciting his friends and family to send him money to support an effort that might have actively worked against God's purposes in this world, aside from the grace of God, who could acknowledge that and not step in front of a train? Right? And so people go, how could he see it? Why can't he see it? And I go, how could he see it? Right? And if it ever does come, if his eyes ever get opened, I'm moving to his town and living with him to make sure he doesn't step in front of a train until I know God's got him, because that is a huge burden to carry. But people will start with an emotionally acceptable conclusion. I like my lifestyle and I don't want to change, and work the facts backwards. Therefore, God doesn't exist in the form that I understand him. Mm-hmm. And what I think it would take to believe in God is going to require too many changes that I'm not willing to make.
And we're seeing
and that may be true of
everywhere.
Believers. We are. And that may be true of believers. To put my faith forward would require me to make changes I'm not willing to make. It may require me to stop telling off-color jokes, or at least laughing at the off-color jokes. I may be convicted. Right. I mean, my wife has a dish towel that says, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little, right? And I have friends that actually give me and her a hard time about the fact that some coarse words slip out of our mouths every now and then, and I'm working on that.
Oh, yeah.
But it might mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It might mean they have to stop going to poker night with the guys, right? Maybe not because poker is inherently bad, but because the conversation or the cigars or the whiskey, is bad for them. I'm not saying any of those are bad unless it's bad for you, right? But people will resist what caused them to make a change that they're not willing to make.
Change. Like for myself, for me, it meant I had to stop working with people in the esoteric, witchcraft, astrology.
Right. When I talk about being around non-believers as a witness field, right? We have to be super careful about engaging with people, right? I've disconnected from people that identify, I haven't blocked them, but I've, unfriended, unconnected. If they say the word Wiccan, if they say the word witchcraft, I'm like, you know what? I'm not in a position to fight that spiritual warfare battle, with you.
It's a spiritual warfare, right?
I don't need you in my world at this moment.
For me, it was about, not that I can't speak to people. It was a matter of what I do is promotional, right? It's social media marketing. I couldn't get behind that anymore.
Mm-mm. No, you can't.
You can have your beliefs and we can talk and all day, but I cannot actively promote these beliefs.
I'm not going to hand you I'm not going to hand you a what do they call it, a loudspeaker, a bullhorn, right? Yeah, I'm not going to.
Right.
I'm not going to amplify.
It was painful. I had to make that change, and I resisted that for a long time. Why? Because it was my business, and and I worked hard to build it. Then I had to completely. So it's an uncomfortable thing to do, and it's hard, and I can understand why people resist, because I was there. Mm-hmm. So
well, as somebody once said, choose your heart. Life is hard, right? Choose your heart.
Yeah. Choose your heart. Absolutely. Choose your heart. But there comes faith. You have to have faith. And I decided to become obedient and follow what I was being told to do, what the Holy Spirit is guiding me to do, and be brave and, stand up for what I believe in. And so that's why I'm here today. And I want to thank you for being here. I did say your website. You do always say something about your website, how people can reach you, not to confuse you with some politician in the UK.
Very, very good. No, thank you. Right. I bought the URL, the website domain, danielpatrickandrews.com, not out of vanity. Please understand. I did it because if you Google Daniel Patrick Andrews, you will find an Australian parliamentarian who's very bombastic and loved and hated in his home country and occupies the first 1 million Google search hits. You can't find me under the name Daniel Andrews or Daniel Patrick Andrews on the internet unless you actually use my URL, danielpatrickandrews.com. It is not a fancy or sophisticated website. It exists to let you know I'm real. It exists to differentiate me from the bombastic Australian parliamentarian by the same name. It's mostly a showcase to archive all my testimonials because I'm not in the marketing business. I'm in the relationship business. And the most important thing you can know about me is to get to know me. But if you want to research me first, page after page of testimonials from real people, not my marketing copy that says what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the relationship business and networking correctly, right? Building networks means building trust and borrowing trust. So if you go to my website, all I want you to do is find the testimonial page and read that, and then either engage with me or not. I'm good either way.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks. This conversation was so fun. I find that you're such a great conversationalist,
Thank you.
Daniel. And I want to thank all my listeners for sticking with us in this interesting episode of The Influential Christian Entrepreneur. And we'll be back again next Tuesday. So stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.